So our next one will be Dr. Tim Gibson, Virginia Conference of the American Association of Universities Professors.
Madam Chair and members of the committee, thank you for allowing me to speak. Let me start with a basic question. What is the role of the university in a free society? At its core, the university is meant to be a space set apart from state power and commercial interests. And within this space, scholars and students must have the freedom to discuss and debate ideas without fear and without favor. The key point here is that for the university to thrive, it must be independent from the exercise of state power and external political pressure. Scholars and students must be free to follow the data and the evidence where it takes them, without looking over their shoulders to see if what they say or the knowledge they produce upsets people in positions of power. I joined the American Association of University Professors because this vision of an open university is enshrined in the AAUP principles of academic freedom and shared governance. And I am honored to currently serve as the president of the AAUP's Virginia Conference. Since its founding in 1915, AAUP has defended the academic freedom of teachers, students, and researchers to discuss issues in their academic fields and to teach and publish their findings without interference from administrators, boards of trustees, political figures, or donors. I am sad to report that at this moment in the Commonwealth's history, the principle of academic freedom is under assault. In fact, the very concept of a strong, independent university free from state coercion and power is under attack by the governor and his allies as they attempt to impose their will on the governance and curriculum of Virginia's public universities. And there is no more dramatic example of this attack on academic freedom in Virginia than the repression of student and faculty protests regarding the ongoing genocide in Gaza. Put simply, without freedom of speech, without freedom of assembly, there is no university. As institutions built on the principle of academic freedom and the free exchange of ideas, the repression of political speech on campus is anathema. It is poison. It cuts against every value that makes the university a place of enlightenment, progress, and reason. Repression of protest on campus is also poisonous because it sends a powerful and chilling message to students and faculty. Repression tells us that the university, our university, is emphatically not a space of open dialogue, that our leaders, in fact, do not share our values, and that they are indeed quite willing to act as the instrument of state coercion against the campus community. And this is when a chill sets into the practice of teaching and research. At AAUP, we have heard from multiple faculty members, especially those whose work focuses on the history, politics, and culture of Israel and Palestine, that they are afraid. Given the repressive climate, should I assign this book? Should I apply for this grant? Should I ask students to grapple with the unvarnished truth about the history and politics of the region? This is when freedom of inquiry begins to be supplanted by silence and fear. We have felt this chill before. We felt it during the McCarthy period and the anti-communist witch hunts of the 1950s. We felt it during the student protests of the civil rights era, when dissenting faculty and students were put under illegal surveillance and subject to violent repression from state and federal authorities. And at George Mason and UVA and Virginia Tech and VCU and many other campuses, we are feeling this chill once again with the increasing push to silence pro-Palestinian and anti-genocide protests across all our campuses. At George Mason, we can feel the chains around faculty and students who are bravely speaking out against the genocide in Gaza getting tighter and tighter with each passing day. For example, last summer, and with no meaningful input from faculty or students, the administration, seemingly at the behest of Youngkin appointees on the Board of Visitors, added the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance's definition and examples of anti-Semitism to our campus anti-discrimination policy. There are many possible definitions of anti-Semitism, including some that I believe most faculty in Virginia would support including in campus anti-discrimination policies. But the IHRA's definition is not one of them. This definition of anti-Semitism is controversial, troubling even, for the simple reason that it lists criticism of Israel as an example of anti-Semitism. In this way, the IHRA definition is viewed by the AAUP and many other academic associations as deeply problematic, given how easily this definition can be weaponized to define legitimate criticisms of Israeli state policy as inherently anti-Semitic. That's unacceptable. The speed at which this definition was adopted, the lack of participation from students and faculty, and the shifting rationales for why the administration felt compelled to install this definition has us worried. In fact, it is difficult to read George Mason University's adoption of the IHRA definition and examples as anything other than an attempt to intimidate students and faculty from engaging in activities that could possibly be construed as criticizing Israeli policy or the genocide in Gaza. In our view, the adoption of the IHRA definition is another example of university administrators bending to the political pressures brought to bear on the university from the governor's office, the board of visitors, and powerful external actors. And now we are in the midst of another scandal concerning the repression of pro-Palestinian speech at Mason. I am speaking, of course, of the suspension of the Students for Justice in Palestine student group at George Mason. I have no comment on the police and FBI search of the two SJP leaders. Unlike Governor Youngkin and President Washington, the Virginia Conference of AAUP is content to let the legal process unfold without making prejudicial statements on the basis of partial information from unnamed sources. We also recognize that university administrators have a responsibility to take reasonable actions to protect the safety and well-being of students and faculty. However, we would like to remind university administrators that however pressured they feel by the governor's office, they do not have the right to use administrative processes to single out particular viewpoints for heightened scrutiny, nor do they have the right to intimidate students and faculty who wish to exercise their rights of free speech and assembly. We are especially alarmed by what seems to us to be a rush to judgment and an eagerness to suspend or expel first and then investigate and assess later. We have yet to hear any compelling rationale for suspending SJP in its entirety, apart from vague allegations levied against only 2 members out of many, many others. Finally, we must also remember when it comes to policing political speech on campus, state and federal authorities have a long history of getting it exactly wrong. From the professor blacklists of McCarthyism to the repression of student-led lunch counter protests to the tragedy of Kent State and 4 dead in Ohio. We therefore urge Mason's administrators and university administrators across the Commonwealth to take a breath and to remember that despite the ongoing and systemic attempt to bring public universities to heel under state authority, they still have an obligation to uphold the independence of the university and its commitment to principles of free speech and open inquiry. In these tense times, university administrators must, indeed, we all must, find the courage to protect academic freedom and free speech. We must work closely with one another in the spirit of shared governance, and we must defend the due process rights of dissenters without engaging in the destructive politics of fear and paranoia. Thank you.
Thank you.